Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. My name is Sam. I'm joined by my great friend. I don't call him a colleague, he's too smart for me. James, how are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Traveling, but we try to never miss a filming session. So today we're talking about breaking the reaction cycle of the unfaithful. Every betrayed who's watching or listening will attest to the fact that we unfaithful can be incredibly reactionary. We can have reactions of anger. We can have reactions of rage. We can have reactions of pouting. We can have reactions of feeling sorry for ourselves and so many other reactions that end up being hurtful and painful and really almost creating a sense of hopelessness and disillusionment in the mind and in the heart of the betrayed. But what is, before we launch into it, or as we launch into it, actually, what is a reaction cycle that we unfaithful get stuck in?
So reaction cycle it's actually very human. So you'll see it across the board. Obviously, there are specifics to us unfaithful that have to do with the dynamic of the couple that's working through betrayal. In essence, the basics of it is there's a trigger, there's a reaction, and then there's a payoff. So the payoff is what keeps us going back to the same reaction of the same trigger. So there has to be a payoff that outweighs the cost. So that's the big deal, is getting that payoff to be less than the cost. So basically looking at it as, okay, this is costing this much, getting that perspective,
Right.
right? So basically it's a trigger reaction payoff. Then the next time the trigger comes up, same reaction, same payoff. So if I can give you an example, the trigger starts things off, it's unanticipated. We don't see it coming. Sometimes you can anticipate things. Hopefully we get better and better at that. But let's just say that this is this everyday sort of a trigger that pops up. And so because it's unanticipated, we're not ready for it. So then we react. And that's often unconscious how we react because it's been in our brains for a long time. And if we were conscious, we'd probably think about it and we'd
Right.
the cycle. What the reaction can be is it can be a very quick and extreme behavior, which is what's going to be most noticeable. Very often it might just be internal. And we still need to pay attention to that because those internal reactions can lead us to negative thinking, negative view of other people, and so on. So then the payoff reinforces that the reaction was okay. And then that feeds the sort of habit cycle or this reaction cycle.
And that could probably be seen. One of the easiest things, maybe to use as an example, is we unfaithful can maybe be triggered, and then our gut reaction, our knee-jerk reaction is to blame. We'll blame our spouse, we'll blame the affair partner, we'll blame anybody that we can, we'll blame our mom and dad, right?
Sure. So let's say that the trigger is something that makes us think we look bad, right? So then we're going to blame, let's say it's our partner. And in order to deflect that looking bad off onto them or onto somebody else or something else. So I want to deflect. I find that person and I do it, or I do it right in that moment while they're in front of me. The payoff for that is that now I don't feel guilty about what I did because I've blamed somebody else for it and I don't have to own it. So I'm off scot free, basically. I don't have to deal with that guilt or shame that goes with what did I do that made me look bad.
Is it the same thing when because we unfaithful, we will rage, we will get angry, and the betrayed sit back and go, wait a minute, you caused all of this. How dare you get so angry? Where is this anger coming from? The audacity of you, the unfaithful, to have all this anger or even raging, right?
Yeah, so it's that realizing on a very deep level, so not necessarily consciously, although sometimes it can be, that we're the ones to blame, and we just can't
Right.
handle that, and so it feels unjust, even though it is just, right? And so then we start to rage, which is anger in action. So we start yelling, throwing things, tantruming. And then the payoff of that is that our partner backs off, shuts up to or makes us right, smooths things out just to make us stop. So then, again, we're off the hook. Okay. My partner's reaction is gone then, which is a justified reaction. And so I don't have to deal with it anymore. And the thing is, it's a brain thing, right?
Right.
So it becomes habit. And habit is anything that we've entrained our brain to do. So by entraining, I mean repetition. Here's the whatever it is, the unjust feeling. It doesn't have to be particularly pointed at some kind of injustice, but it has to make us feel like, oh, I'm being blamed, and we might rightfully need to own that blame, but it still feels the same as though we're being blamed. So maybe we had a bunch of times when we were a kid where we were blamed for things we didn't do, and the penalty was harsh. And so we get this reaction habit going where, okay, if I react in the tantrumy kind of way, that's going to back everybody off. It doesn't have to be tantrum. It can be cold shoulder. It can be silence. It can be anything that gets the other person to stop. And so the more that's repeated through our lives, the more it hardwires into our brain. So we've got this pathway, neural pathway that's embedded. And then anything that is associated with that. So our brain starts going, keep a lookout for any time we're going to be blamed for something. And that's going to be unjust because our brain tells us it's going to be wrong, even though it could be absolutely appropriate. And so we start looking for other people's body posture. We start looking for anything that might clue us in. And then within us, we start getting these thoughts. We start reading those outside. We start feeling all that injustice. And then we want to put that back out onto somebody else. So that's that. It gets hardwired into the brain. And that's what we're fighting here. We're not fighting something that's just started upon discovery. We're fighting something that's probably been a habit all our lives. And it's not something like a habit where, oh, I'm smoking, so I know I got to stop, or it's going to do damage. It's not as conscious as that. It's just how we've reacted. Probably started as a very good defense as a child or a teenager. Now it's not a good defense.
Well, because it's really massively unhealthy when you're trying to heal from infidelity, complex PTSD, when we're trying to win back the heart of our betrayed, this doesn't strike me at any level as healthy.
No, it's not. So you got to remember for this that anything that remains unconscious, so that we're not conscious of it, is going to drive our behaviors. And so it's our duty, it's our job as human beings to make the unconscious conscious over our lifetime. In this case, we really have an extra impetus because how much is this adding to the harm that has been done to my partner? So we've got that extra impetus because it's no longer, okay, maybe it isn't acceptable reactive behavior, but it was sort of like, okay, people could deal with it. But now it's so much worse when we do it. So we need to have that, we need to make it conscious in order to not do that anymore. What that means is we've got to own it. So if it is unconscious, it means we're not owning it. And if we're not owning it, we can't do anything about it. And then nothing ever changes. So that when we can make it conscious, then we can do something about it. I'm not saying this is easy or fun,
Right.
or you like it, but it is necessary. Another thing with why it's so unhealthy is that it simply is divisive. It's going to make us feel somehow superior to the other person because, let's say, the blame thing again, we're blaming them. Then they're always doing something wrong. And then we hold them in a lower esteem than we do others or ourselves. And then they become a problem for us. And so then we form and hold resentments against them. You're always this, you're always that. And it's always taken me down and so on. Those resentments against our partner then are actually a resentment against ourselves unconsciously, We don't realize it, but because we're the ones doing the action, we're throwing a resentment outwards, but that resentment is actually pointing at us. And so that is even more powerful because we want to get rid of that.
Right.
And that diminishes our personal power because
Yeah.
we're not owning it. So when we own stuff, we're more empowered.
And I know that many betrayed would listen and feel like, yes, you're describing my husband, wife perfectly. Eventually, there's got to be the question, can this cycle really be broken? Like, is there a way out? Or is this, James, Sam, are you just telling me this is the way they are and they're going to always be like this? Or is there hope for them to break it?
There is absolutely hope. I mean, you see people do their work and change all the time. That doesn't mean that it's easy. We're putting together something that's relatively simple, and a lot of change, human change, is simple. It's just not easy. It is difficult to do, and it takes hard work, and it takes focus, and it takes dedication. So yes, absolutely, we can break the cycle. First, we have to ask ourselves a few questions, though. Hey, does this happen a lot? Sometimes we actually don't recognize it till somebody brings it to our attention.
Mm.
And let's say that this podcast helps you take a look at things and go, okay, where do I do this? It could be the blaming thing. It could be any number of other things, but they're all sort of negative reactions or things that are divisive and damaging. So does it happen a lot? That's going to tell me if I'm in this cycle, in this loop of trigger, reaction, payoff. If I'm in that loop, if it's happening a lot, then that tells me I'm in that loop. Okay, so now I'm going to ask myself, what are some other examples in my life where this is happening, or other things that are repetitive are happening that are negative? It's sort of like that idea that if you meet a jerk in the morning, you met a jerk. But if you meet jerks all day long, you're the jerk, right?
Right.
So, okay, if I met somebody who was really reactive in the morning, and then and I meet reactive people all day long, I got to look at it. Am I reactive? If I'm looking at it, it verifies that it happens often enough that I can say, okay, that's a habit, that's a cycle I have, and that needs to be broken. So we need that impetus. We need to be able to see it clearly like that to be able to do it. Another way to tell is, does someone else do it and that annoys me or irritates me or upsets me? Well, that's that finger pointing forward, three back. Okay, if somebody else does it, maybe they do it, probably. But then I got to look at, why is it upsetting to me? So if, like, let's look at it this way. If it's just upsetting me on a 0 to 4, just there, that's them doing it. But if my reaction inside or out is over a 4, all the way up to a 10, right, then that means that there's something historical. There's something in it that I'm doing as well. So I need to be responsible for that. So that's a really great way to see, oh, wow, it's called projection. Oh, wow, that's something I need to work on as well. It's great. The world's a mirror. It gives us that. Now I've got to ask myself, what's the price that I pay? What's the price others pay for my reactivity? Is it worth the damage? The other way to look at this also is, do I want to break this habit? And you got to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I'm going to tell you, it is every single time if you want to break this, because it's going to save you. It's going to save your partner from all of this reactiveness. You got to ask yourself, how does it happen? What's my pattern? I had a teacher when I was 8 years old, and he used to, well, his big thing was, if in doubt, draw it out. And that was one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. He was Mr. Walker. He was a fantastic teacher. You know how you have a few teachers who really affect you in life. He was one of them. So I'm gonna draw it out. I'm gonna write it out. What sets me off? What makes me react? What are my triggers? How do I react then? Those are two things that I'm going to write down, and maybe I'm going to put them in little boxes. Okay, here's a box, here's an arrow, here's another box. How do I react? If I can get a really clear picture of that in my brain, like I'm going to run a video through my head and imagine me reacting. It may not be pretty, by the way. Run it through like a movie, and that's going to help you really see it. It's going to really help you envision that and go, ooh, yeah, I don't want to be doing that. So seeing yourself from the outside can show you just how much outside of your integrity that you are, because it doesn't fit with your self-image.
Hmm.
And then you ask, the next box is, why do I react? What is my surface feeling? Let's say it's anger. What's my feeling under that? A lot of times it's going to be fear. It could be sadness. Get out your feelings wheel. I just did a short on how to feel your feelings and how to deal with them. And that can give you an idea: happy, mad, sad, glad, anxious, and so on. That is going to help us see what we're doing and why. And that's going to help us own it. If I can own it, I can go, that's when I realize, okay, I'm doing that, right? That's what owning it is. I am doing
Yeah.
that. And it isn't fair. Now, that can lead us to making an appropriate amends to the person that it's hurting. That means myself, my partner, other people, perhaps my employees, perhaps my boss, perhaps other people that I work with, coworkers. And I make those amends for the original triggering mistake. And then I need to be able to make an amends for the secondary behavior. So the hurtful behavior, the blaming. It also has this effect of helping us empathize with others. People wonder, how do I do empathy? This is one of the ways. When we see our own stuff and how it hurts ourselves, and how when I'm taking that movie view of it, then I can see how it's hurting somebody else. And then I can feel more empathetic towards them and express that. If we're then able to empathize with others who do the same thing, because we recognize that we do it and how it makes us feel. So that gives us a lot of, oh, wow, my partner's angry or sad or distant or alone or isolating. And I get that because I do that. Now I can see that I do that. And that helps
Yeah.
with the empathy as well.
Well, I think anytime we can empathize with our partner, it helps us, and especially the betrayed would sit back and say, man, yeah, however you can help my unfaithful find more empathy, that would be great. Now, how do we help them, the unfaithful in this, deal with the guilt, the shame that eventually continues to stir within them?
So these would be what would be unanticipated results, right? So everything that we've said so far sounds hard, but okay, great. That's going to work out really well. It is, and the results of doing it that you might not anticipate are feeling the guilt, feeling the shame. And shame is really guilt turned inward until it festers and rots. Guilt is actually healthy. It allows us to keep in mind what we've done and to be able to make amends for that. And it's also a really great measure against which we can look at our day. How have we been today? When we do sort of our end of the day check in with ourselves, do I need to make amends anywhere? That guilt is a great way for us to say, okay, do I feel guilty about anything? Shame is terrible. It festers, it rots, it grows when it does that, like mold. If we go with the examples that we've done, blaming ourselves turns into blaming ourselves for everything. Yelling at ourselves becomes constant inner criticizing until our view of ourselves becomes more of a self-hatred thing. It can become really unbearable, so that the more we blame or criticize ourselves, the more we blame and criticize others on the outside, because we can't tolerate that. And nor should we tolerate that. We need to be able to notice when we're doing these things, because these are results of shame. It also is going to then, because now we can't tolerate that feeling because it's so big, that we start putting it outside of ourselves. It also starts adding to, making new and reinforcing old resentments. And those become more and more divisive, and eventually will come out sideways in very unintended, always hurtful, often harmful ways.
How do we become better at owning this type of behavior? How do we become more skilled at owning our defensiveness, our anger, our even need to pause and reevaluate how unhealthy we're being?
What you're talking about is creating resilience surrounding this. So
Hmm.
self-resilience. So the first thing to do is I've got to ask myself, what can I learn from this? This happened, right? I'm going to make these amends. I've done all the things that we've listed so far. Now, what can I learn from this? Just asking that question accelerates you, sort of is like a rocket launching into growth.
Yeah.
Um, you have to remind yourself too that this is a habit that your brain learned a long time ago as a defense against emotional pain. So it's a habit. It's been repeated and repeated. And that's so that you don't feel the emotional pain. If you remind yourself of that, then that's going to be helpful that, okay, that's why this happened. So I can move forward from that place because I don't want that to continue. The process that created that in the brain is normal. It's a reaction cycle. So we've got to remember that it is a normal reaction when we're younger to form this cycle, but it isn't what you want anymore. And that's,
Right.
you've got to be clear on that. I don't want that anymore. And you've also got to remember that because the brain process is the same, you can change it. You can create a new cycle. So the trigger can lead to a healthy reaction, and then the payoff is actually a reward for that healthy action. So here's the trigger. Oh, normally that would take me into anger. I'm going to try to understand it better. I'm going to respond rather than react. And then you're not going to get the the angry reaction, for instance, in return. So that's a great payoff. Now you are at actual peace instead of I pushed it away and I feel like I'm at peace, but no, I'm really not. I'm numbed, and just because they're the absence of that coming at me. So it takes repetition over and over again. We've got to, if we're putting in this new neural pathway, this one is going to, the brain sends in its demolition crew. This one's going to disappear over time, but we have to stay on this one and keep repeating it. So to do that, we need to address that base emotion. So say the fear or the sadness underneath the anger. How can I counteract that? Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. Stuffing it is not going to make it go away. So affirmations are great. People are like, okay, that's some hippy dippy stuff, man. That doesn't work, right? It's just some hippie stuff. No, it's been shown in neurological studies time and again since about 2008, 2010, that they work. So it is a repetition. I can handle this would be I can handle this. I can do this would be a great affirmation. Get real about it. That's another way to look at it. Is there really something to be scared of? Or what am I actually sad about? Oh, I can understand that. If so, ask yourself, what could the results be? And can I prepare myself for those or preempt them? Obviously, honestly, and transparently. That can take a lot of the fear away. Speak it out loud. When clients tell us, this is what's happening for me, I'm really scared of this, this, and this, it takes so much of the power away. That's so
Right.
important. So preferably this is to a helper or support. Obviously, at some point in your partnership, or coupleship, you're going to want to be able to share these things vulnerably with your partner. So this is going to, whether you do or not, is going to depend on how far are we in our recovery for that to be something that is going to work here. Take considerate action. By that, I mean, you're going to consider what action you're going to take. So just like speaking it, taking action is going to defeat the fear. So there's another piece to this. We need to get conscious. I'm talking about a lot of conscious stuff, right? So this helps you
Right.
get conscious. Connect the dots surrounding the trigger. So the how you feel connected with what am I thinking? So what are the thoughts that come up? Let's say, okay, I'm feeling angry. Yes, underneath that is scared or fearful or anxious. What thought comes up when you're feeling that? Why that's right? I'm always being blamed. So you've got to be conscious of those thoughts, because if you can't locate what's happening here earlier, your thoughts are going to be able to tell you, and then you can shift out of that. Check out how other people react to your reaction, or any feedback you get from somebody who isn't actually afraid to challenge your perceptions. So not a yes person, right?
Right.
So listen to feedback, even if it makes you mad. Then you might have to go through, oh yeah, there's my cycle again. Is my action, my reaction in opposition to how I felt or what my thoughts were? That's another good one to look at. How do I feel afterward? Do I feel guilt, shame, sadness, anger at myself? All of those indicate that you might have been out of your integrity, out of your right mind, as it were, and reactive in a way that really isn't suited to the trigger itself. So think about that scale, 0 to 4, appropriate. 4.1 to 10, those are all levels of inappropriate reaction. A big one is creating a different vision. So you're creating a new movie in your head. Remember that movie that we talked about? Oh, yeah, I'm seeing myself react here. What's my new movie going to be? And I want that to be in concert with who I really am, how I want to be, what I'm a good guy. I'm a nice guy. I respond and I'm kind and I'm considerate and I'm empathetic and I'm compassionate. Okay, so create that movie in your head. See yourself doing something differently. This especially works if you're a visual learner. And since 70% of Americans, at least, are, because that's where the study was done, are visual learners. So we're big on that. That helps us to be able to see it. It also sort of is a mind way of acting that through in our head, like we're a part in that movie. So we're actually a piece of it or a part of it. So we're feeling like we're doing that when we're viewing it. You play that positive action tape over and over, and it also helps your brain establish that new neural pathway we're talking about. Because if you're just waiting for every time that you're triggered to practice that new neural pathway, there's a strong likelihood you're going to slip into this old one and keep it built, right? Because the more you use this, the demolition crews are standing off to the side going, okay, still being used. We can't take that thing apart. And then doing that leads to healthy responses.
The thing I love about today is number one, helping the betrayed find hope that an unfaithful who has a reactionary cycle can change. But we've been very heavy today on the mechanics of how you want to change. What's clear to me is you don't have to have a scientific brain to change. You have to have the want to. Would you agree that all of this is phenomenal information, of course, but without the want to, we're not going to do this. But if we have the want to, and if we really believe that our reactionary cycle is harming our mate and really harming our family, that we are then willing to do the work. And today, you phenomenally outlined work that has to be done. So even if today might be like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot, it's really not when you have the want to. Would you agree?
I agree. Another part of that is you, that might help give you more want as well as I don't want to do this to myself anymore.
It's a phenomenal piece. You're exactly right. Because infidelity and addiction, really at the core of it, is self-harming behavior, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's symptomatic of a lot of stuff, but those symptoms are very harmful and they are self-harming. Absolutely. It harms us and everybody around us. So this isn't one of
And I,
those things where, well, I'm not really hurting anybody else.
well, and I think when you break it down and you realize anybody that's on the other side of infidelity or addiction who's sober or who is healthy, who has done their work, if they've gotten expert help, I think that they would come to a point like you and I obviously talk about it all the time off camera, but we talk about it as well on camera that, I was harming myself and everybody else. This wasn't just this escape. Oh, everything's great to be in an addiction or to have an affair. We were self-harming. And that's a piece that I think the betrayed every now and then need a good reminder that we may appear that we're cavalier and that we're just what have you. But at the end of the day, when we get healthy, there is an immense amount of grief that comes when we realize, man, I was hurting myself and I was hurting everybody else. Would you agree?
I do. Honestly, the level of hurt that we're doing to ourselves is no different than somebody who, let's say, is a cutter. I mean, that's seriously hurting yourself. So if we think about that, it sounds really harsh, but it's true. They're physically hurting themselves so they can feel something. We are doing it sort of more on an psychic level, so to ourselves inside, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. I'm not saying that doesn't go on for physical cutters. Of course, all that does.
Of course, absolutely. But the heart of what we're saying today, especially you unfaithful, you don't have to keep living this way. The voices in your head, maybe some people that have tried to help you or actually have harmed you, might tell you that you're always going to be this way and that you should just give up. But on behalf of James and myself, we just want to tell you that's absolutely not true. Today has been a great exploration in some, not all, but a lot of the work that you can do to actually change because change is possible. But at the end of the day, our hope is that you would get healthy. If you're betrayed, we are so honored and thankful that you would take time to listen to these videos because they can help you, they can help your partner, they can give you tools of what to look for in the life of the unfaithful. We are thinking about every single one of you. I can tell you on behalf of James and myself, we love to do what we do because we think about the pain that we have caused. I don't think a day goes by, James, where I don't reflect upon the pain that I've caused, either my family or my partner. Everybody in my life suffered because of the choices that I made 20 years ago. And we keep it fresh in our mind, not out of condemnation, not out of shame, but because we never want to be that person ever again, right?
That's so right. I'm so glad you beat me to that because that is so right. We don't want to be that person again, so we're not dwelling in it. We're not in a quagmire of it, but we are. Yeah, it's called in the 12-step world keeping yourself green.
Well, we're so grateful that you tuned in today. If we can help, by all means, feel free to reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment here on any of the platforms that you are watching or listening, and we will see you again next time on Ask the Unfaithful.